Hi, this is Professor Tiffany Martin with Medical Microbiology, and we are in Chapter 5, and we are working our way through cellular respiration. We're at the last stage, which is that occurs the electron transport chain. It's that process of chemiosmosis, the process of taking adenosine diphosphate and phosphorylating it, adding a phosphate to it to become ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So we're at the last stage, and you remember I started with the last step first, so you've already got a good idea of what happens there. But just like any good mystery, you always have some holes that were left out at the beginning. So let's go back and review that just a touch and then fill in the things that I didn't tell you at the beginning. Okay, so electron transport chain, a lot of ATP happens by the process of chemiosmosis. And where does this occur? Where is that electron transport chain? In a prokaryotic cell, it's a cell membrane, right? Phospholipid bilayer, so it occurs in the cell membrane. A eukaryotic cell, just so that you can lay it down with other things you're learning in other courses, this membrane is going to be in the mitochondria. It's that inner membrane of the mitochondria, which is called the cristae. And we know that glucose comes in, gets broken down and gets oxidized, which transfers some of those electrons to carriers such as NAD+, and remember FAD, remember that guy, he showed up one time. They pick up these electrons with their hydrogens and bring them to the electron transport chain. So let's see what is happening there at the electron transport chain. All right, so this should look familiar. So review those things. There's a phospholipid bilayer, my integral proteins. This one uses energy to pump, so proton pump is what that's called. Hydrogens, more up here, there's a concentration gradient. So these hydrogens are desperate to reach equilibrium. They want to come back in through this proton channel. That enzyme ATP synthase is sitting right here at the bottom and will bind ADP and a phosphate and phosphorylate ADP to become ATP due to that kinetic energy that is being produced by these hydrogens coming through. So it's very important to keep this process going, because when all the hydrogens get inside, or when it reaches equilibrium, then we're not going to get any more passage through here. We're not going to produce any more energy that's needed to produce ATP. And when we don't make ATP, we die. So we've got to keep this process going. We have to keep pumping these hydrogens out so that they can come back in. All right, so now we know where we said there was going to be some energy involved. We know where these hydrogens are coming from. Where are they coming from? These hydrogen ions that we need are coming from NADH, and we had lots of those. NAD+ got reduced, picked up a hydrogen with its electron, and it's coming here to the electron transport chain. All right, so we've got to get NADH to drop off its hydrogen. It needs to donate this electron here. And these proteins on the proton pump can accept an electron. So they're going to accept that electron, and in that process, it's going to give enough energy. There's my electron. So it accepts this electron. It's going to give enough energy to pull off that hydrogen, to strip that electron away from this hydrogen, and now this hydrogen ends up being an ion, and it gets pushed up. NADH gives up its hydrogen. NADH donates its hydrogen to become NAD+. So NADH got oxidized or reduced. NADH donated its electron with its hydrogen to become NAD+. NADH got oxidized. Oxidation involves loss. You can see it lost its electron. Who accepted the electron? This protein here, this integral protein. It pulled that, and the energy required, the energy that that stripped off the electron was enough energy to push that hydrogen ion out. So the pump, this energy part, comes from pulling off that electron. Stripping that electron gives the energy needed to push the hydrogen ion outside. So that's where that energy comes from. from that process. Now I have an 80 plus. Where's he going to go? He can go back to the glycolysis and Krebs cycle and pick up more electrons and keep this process going. So again, that's why they talk about them being carriers for these. This is why, again, remember, this is one of those things that's involved in our diets, our vitamins. If we don't get the right foods, this process isn't going to work as well. So we've got to make sure we get our vitamins and minerals in our diets. Okay, so now I have this electron here. I pumped out a hydrogen, but remember we had more NADHs. A lot of them were made, oh, that's another one, on this, and there's an NADH here, and it's bringing an electron, and it would like to give it away, but this protein would like to accept it, but he's already holding one. He's holding it, and he can't give it away until he gets rid of the one that's already taken up this space. So he needs, before he can do anything else, he needs to pass this electron to someone else. He needs to donate it to something else. So we've talked about this being the electron transport chain, and this is our first time talking about electrons. One thing that I didn't tell you is that within this electron transport chain, in addition to our proteins, integral proteins that make up our proton pump and proton channel, there are additional proteins within this phospholipid bilayer. Now, you don't need to know the names of the proteins. They differ per organism. So bacterial proteins are different than the ones in animals and different organisms. But just know that there are proteins within this electron transport chain that can accept and donate electrons. So this guy needs to move him out of the way so that he can accept the next one coming in. So let's take this electron and pass it to the next guy. So the next protein will accept that electron. And now we've passed it from here to here, and this guy is now free to accept the next one. So the next one comes in, and he donates this electron. He gets oxidized, becomes NAD+, and now we've got another electron moving through, which allowed us to push or pump another hydrogen out. So we're getting this process going and keeping this process going. Okay, what do we need to do now? We need to pass these electrons again. So this one is going to go to the next one, and this one is going to go to the next one, and that leaves the original spot open. This electron got passed to this protein, this electron here got passed to this protein, and now he's open and can receive another one. So these electrons are just being passed down by the chain here. Okay, so these electrons are getting passed down the line, and so that we can keep this open. Now, when they first show up, well, let's go back to passing things. Imagine we're at a cookout and there is a fire and there are baked potatoes wrapped up on the fire, and I reach into the baked potato to get a baked potato, and it is really hot, right? It's got a lot of energy in there. It's really hot and it's going to burn my hands. I'm going to pass it quickly to the next person, who's going to then pass it to the next person and pass it to the next person all the way down the line until we have fed everybody with baked potatoes. When I first pick it up, it's so hot it's burning my hands. By the time it gets to the last person, it's not as hot anymore. What happened? We lost energy through heat. So that heat had a lot of energy in it. Every time I touched it, that some of that heat and that energy transferred to my hands, which is why my hands got hot. Some of that heat energy transferred to the air, which is why if you leave things out in the air, it'll cool it. So when I start off, my potatoes are high energy, have a lot of heat. By the time we pass them along, they have less energy. All right, same process is happening with my electrons here. I am passing them from protein to protein, and eventually they become low energy, and they're not useful anymore. So the electrons need to come out of the electron transport chain so that new ones can keep coming in and we can keep this process going. So I need a molecule that can accept this electron. So I have this electron here, and I need a molecule that will come and accept this electron. Okay, so we've talked about aerobic respiration. Have you found where oxygen shows up? Have you been listening? This is the moment. Oxygen is showing up here. Now, oxygen, there's my O for oxygen. Oxygen in the atmosphere is O2. Two oxygen molecules come together, and it's because if you go back to chemistry and valence shells and how many electrons they have, oxygen really wants to share electrons. It is not happy by itself. In fact, this singlet oxygen, is so unhappy that chemists don't even call it a single oxygen. They call it 1/2 O2. He is so unhappy with his amount of electrons that they call him 1/2 O2. So this oxygen is actively searching for electrons. This can actually make him very dangerous. This is one of those things where you talk about antioxidants. We have to have ways of protecting ourselves against this oxygen because he is so excited about stealing electrons. So we do have enzymes other places that protect us, but in this particular situation, it works in our favor because he wants some electrons and we have some electrons that we need to give. So these electrons are passing through singlet oxygen. Remember in our initial glucose plus oxygen? So singlet oxygen accepts this electron. Now, depending on his valence shells, these electrons that it can accept, he actually has room to accept my red's not working anymore. He has room to accept 2 electrons. So now my 1/2 O2 can pick up 1 electron. These electrons shift over, and that 1/2 O2 can pick up 2 electrons. Oxygen is considered the final electron acceptor in this electron transport chain, and that's a very important role because if there's there's nothing to pick up, there's nothing to donate this electron to, he has to hold it, which means he has to hold it, and he has to hold it, he has to hold it, and then we can't pump any more hydrogens back out. And these hydrogens are coming back in until equilibrium is reached. And if equilibrium is reached and we can't pump any more out, we can't make ATP, and what happens? We die. We've got to keep this going. So oxygen is very important. It needs to accept these 2 electrons. Okay, so far, hopefully you're getting the pathway and the electron transport chain. You see how that chain is working. So oxygen now has accepted 2 electrons, much happier. But I need to tell you something else. These hydrogens keep coming through using that kinetic energy, that movement through here to power ATP synthase. So now I have a lot of hydrogens over here. What's going to happen to these guys? Can I take these guys and pump it back out? Can I just take these hydrogens, I want them back here, and just send them back through? Yes or no? What generated the energy needed to get this hydrogen pumped through? The energy needed comes from stripping off that electron. That NADH, that hydrogen with its electron, when that electron got stripped off and donated here, that generated the energy to push this guy out. Does he have an electron to strip off? He does not. He cannot generate the energy needed to get pumped back out. So don't tell me that he can come back out and do this again. That's not how it works. So now I have a whole bunch of these hydrogen ions, and they've got a positive charge. What else do they want? These hydrogen ions, well, oxygen right here has 2 pretty looking electrons right here. He would actually like one. He's a positively charged ion. He's very attracted to these electrons. Hydrogen comes over here and says, hey, oxygen, can I share your electrons? And oxygen right now is much happier. They've got their electrons, and hydrogen's like, yeah, sure, you can share them. So I now have oxygen with 2 electrons sharing it with that hydrogen ion. What have I made here? H2O, water. Water is a byproduct of cellular respiration, and this is where it comes. Now, typically, this is metabolic water. It's a byproduct, so your body actually gets rid of it. We get rid of it through sweat, urine, that kind of thing. We're usually getting rid of this. Now, in areas where we're highly dehydrated, your body will hold on to this. Again, we don't want to die, and we need water as well. But this water is a byproduct, and we actually get rid of it in different pathways. Okay, this was a lot, but I think we have filled in all the things. We've got a couple of PowerPoint slides to go through. I'm going to stop this video here so it doesn't get too long in YouTube, and then we'll come back out and summarize the electron transport chain, okay? Thanks.